Welcome to the Samuele Tini Show, where business, innovation and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in. Welcome to a new episode. And today on the show, we are going to discuss the role of capital, the role of investments, how they can drive innovation and sustainability. And we do with somebody that has been at the forefront with big brands and a wonderful startup, and now is at the helm of Ithaca Capital Partners. Her name is Isabelle Todaro. Sorry if I done it correctly. Thank you so much, Isabelle, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Samuele, for inviting me to your podcast. It's a great pleasure talking to you today.
And Isabelle, if somebody looks at your CV just on LinkedIn or otherwise, like, wow, you have an amazing career. Now you are leading an investment fund. You're working with innovators at the forefront. But we ask our first question to all our guests is, who is Isabelle? Which are the milestones that have taken you to this path?
Wow. So maybe I'll start talking a bit about my career then. And as you know, every career is an evolution. And I believe that the journey is what makes it interesting. And this is why I chose Ithaca. It's inspired by the poem from Constantine Cavafy, which talks about the journey. So I began my career in banking, and to be completely candid with you, I think it was a bit by chance. So I loved the fast-paced environment, the deal making, the international aspect of it. And over time, I grew up the corporate ladder, spent a lot of time at UBS. And through that, I started working more and more with entrepreneurs. And I found it very exciting. And that's kind of what led me to Ÿnsect, where I took on the role of CFO plus. And what do I mean with the plus? It meant that I was in charge of finance, as you would expect as a CFO, legal, HR, communication, and digital. So a lot of operational corporate function as well. Now you'd ask me who is Ÿnsect or what is Ÿnsect? Well, as the name indicates, it's a biotech company reimagining the food system through insect protein.
Fantastic.
So it's there that I experienced firsthand how challenging and powerful it is to scale a mission-driven business. And after leaving Ÿnsect, then I decided to set up Ithaca Capital Partners, where we help advise and invest in company driving innovation for a better future.
Fantastic. And what a career. Big names, wonderful startup that I'm really eager also to understand a bit more. And now you have gone a notch higher, at the ecosystem, looking at creating an ecosystem for innovator and work. And with your role as managing partner and founding partner on that, can you help us? Even for a lay audience that we have in the podcast. So how do you evaluate company? How you go and select the innovators, especially looking the one that can give us a better future?
So we work a bit the other way around for most investment firms. It's not like we scan the market and then decide to write a check. Obviously, money is critical and it's the name of the game, as we all know. But for us, it will come later. So our model is based on first identify companies that we generally want to work with, founders we believe in, mission that resonate, and innovation that have the potential to shift system. So then we spend time to get to know them and we understand their challenge, and we basically start by advising and offering strategic support. So that way we build trust and there is a strong alignment of interest, and then investment follows. So it's kind of a long-term partnership from day one, and we help them from everything from go-to-market to governance to scaling with integrity. And I think one of the key differentiating factor is the fact that having been for over 20 years in banking and raising capital and understanding all the key driver from the investor side, combined with having had firsthand operating experience, this is not something that everyone has. So that operating experience gives us a different way to also interact with founders, a different understanding of their journey.
And on that, I want to go a bit. So, you said the supports go, if I can frame it correctly, beyond capital. So, also discussing the support of governance stuff. Having worked with startups, especially also here in the emerging markets and others, which are the biggest challenges that you see? Because especially the startup has always held like the foster innovation and others, but also at the ground, since you are working with many of them, which are the challenges you often find?
So I really wanted to help and use my experience to help other founders scale, because, I saw it firsthand. It's difficult, and it's bumpy and it's challenging. So I wanted to pass on that knowledge, and I wanted to capitalize on what I know. So I'll help them, if they have to go to market and raise capital. Some of them have very good ideas, but they don't always know how to pitch it or how to explain it, how to make it palatable, especially if you go into a more specialized sector or deep tech sector. You tend to have people who are extremely passionate, which is what you want to see, but also then it's very hard, and investors have about 2 minutes to decide whether they're going to go further into this or not. So how do you make sure that your pitch is compelling? So that's one aspect. How do you make sure that you're organized and set up to scale? And, people tend to focus on science or operations, and not always very well on operations, actually. And how do you make sure that you're surrounded by the right people? How do you make sure that your board is from the right people? So all these things are obviously critical. And I think founders are getting smarter about it. But their investor and the people by their side make a huge difference to their ability to pivot, get organized, scale the right way. And that makes a big difference, because it's very important, obviously, to have a good idea. It's critical. Like, we're super focused on founders and resilience, because we know that the ride will be bumpy. And so that makes the difference between success and failure many times. And as anybody who's been in that world, that success and failure will be the course of your day, 5 times a day, every day. So it's all about learning to sort of mitigate these ups and downs so that you also stay sane. And that's part of the thing that we can help with also, is taking that distance. So it's really bringing the different aspect of strong financial acumen, strong commercial drive, as well as experience firsthand from the operational side. And then we see a lot of funders struggling with different things, right? So if the company scales too fast, sometimes they trip. If it's not fast enough, you lose momentum. So it's hard to generalize what are the issues. I think capital is a big issue at the moment, and that's across. Doesn't matter. I think unless you were in AI, you found it quite difficult to raise money. So it makes it, you need to be even smarter about it. And even people with great ideas are struggling. And investment sentiment, I think, changed a few years ago. And, when I was raising money for Ÿnsect, I could already see it. Like, it was really, really tough environment where people had stopped focusing on growth and were focusing on profitability. And people are still focused on that. And now there is even more uncertainties in the world, which makes people reluctant to make big decisions. So I think capital, although there is a lot of dry powder, capital is not being deployed in the same way. And that, I think, will be a difficulty for everyone. Doesn't matter the stage, because historically what you would see is companies post Series B, which call it the valley of death, right? That's when they started needing more capital. And especially in Europe, you didn't have enough capital to do that. So people were scaling sort of like seed A, and then B, they need a bit more, like a lot more money. And if you would not had a foot in the US, you would find it more difficult. So European government, and for instance, I took first experience from what the French have done, was great. They tried to push for more capital in the country towards, promote startups in France and so on. So we started to mitigate that a bit. It's still there. And then if you'd managed to make it to the other side, sort of Series C, Series D, you would have other funds that came in that were larger and that could help with your growth. And I think now across the globe, it's difficult. So you have funds that have raised quite a lot of money that are not seeing any IPO from the companies that they have invested in. So they need to recycle that cash and be able to reinvest. And you have companies that are, still looking for money and finding it harder and harder. So I think it's about being very resilient and very nimble with your cash until, things turn.
So it's a moment where I think the runway is getting shorter and shorter for startups and people, and there is less cash to burn. So you need to be more focused. If I can summarize it in a sentence. So it's really important, especially for us in emerging markets, is the risk also sometimes is perceived even higher for startups and others compared, for example, to Europe or the US, because of course people, although growth parameter here, sometimes there may be double digit or close to double digit compared to more stagnant growth in Europe. So the balance is always there. And can you share, usually for something that more anecdotal, but of course that is how we can understand. And can you give us some example or case study that some innovators, some startups that you are working with and that really excites you?
Well, in the same sector that is close to Insect is a company called Better Origin, which I've known for a while now, and helped the founder and invested in the company recently. They're UK based, of a Greek co-founder, so close to home for me as well. Very interesting technology. I was impressed by the sort of all the AI and all the technologies put around the company and how he's managed to demonstrate the viability. So it's with flies and not with the beetle as Insect was doing. So he's raising VSF and he's solving the waste problem. So when I looked at the business, I was impressed by the resilience of the team, how they tweaked, how they've managed to be in business with raising very little money, what they've demonstrated from a product fit, the technology, and all done in a relatively small scale. And the added big plus I thought of this company is how they're solving the waste problem, because they feed the fly with waste. So very circular. And basically, as they portray it to me, it's a bit like, you have an apple and it falls on the floor and it becomes rotten. It used to be eaten by animals and then would be recycled. So we're trying to do that exactly with the flies. So that's a company that's naturally I felt quite comfortable helping, and they're currently looking to expand and looking to really build it as a way to solve the waste problem. So there is obviously the output, which has a lot of benefits, which we can go on about. But the input is also solving a problem. So you're solving a problem at two ends with an amazing technology.
And really, this is like, copying nature. We have discussed in previous episodes how we can leverage nature solution in a way. So insects, for the people, maybe I can summarize, or BSF is a small fly that usually grow on waste with the larvae and then can decompose and create oil and can create organic manure out of it. And having worked in the space of BSF, I'm a lower scale, of course, here in Africa, where it's difficult. No, I really see the importance because it's solving a social problem, that is the waste and the circularity, giving solution and others. But of course, if we can ask a subsequent question that which are the start, because it's very clear, every business maybe starts, especially as I say here in the emerging market, like from a social problem. So we need to solve circularity, we need to solve poverty, we need to solve access to credit. But then, which is the nitty and gritty behind it? How you have created financial strategy and how you have worked for along these 3 years, how to make an idea, very nice, very wonderful BSF, into a startup that a successful startup.
So I think you need to be quite creative. And when it comes to, a lot of companies are not necessarily defining a new category. And so insect protein is a category creator in general. So I think a lot of work was to convince people that this category has merit. So that's one step, and it sounds obvious, but it's quite tricky, and it's quite difficult to achieve, especially in this side of the world, right? Because if you were to look at it in Asia or in Mexico, people get it because people eat insects. So that was the first thing, and then going to your customers and then trying to get people to buy into it. So that's sort of your output. How do you convince people of the output? And then you have all the input and the processing in the middle. So from a pure operational point of view, like what do you feed the insect with? What's the optimal regime? What's the optimal diet so that you get the best output? And it's a constant improvement. And that's where technology helps a lot. Because depending on the insect you pick, you have a different cycle. And you tell me when I bore you with too much detail. But like depending on that, you have a different cycle. So you want to be able to perceive it as quickly as possible. So category creator, to make it more generic, is always more challenging because you have to convince, you have to show all the use case and so on. Whereas if you are going with something that's existing, so let me give you another example, could be one company I also work with is doing salads, but in a different way. So that salads there's already a need for it. So you're solving for climate change around the salad, but salads are already there. So it depends what you're doing. And as I said, witnessing firsthand, a category creator has challenged that other companies may not have. And I think for anyone who does it, it's convincing people of what it does for the system and the ecosystem.
I recall, because also here there was a backlash, or not a backlash, but I would say something that also people, when BSF was introduced as animal feed for chickens or for fish, or even now we see here in Kenya some people doing for dogs with BSF protein. At the beginning, of course, people say insects and things. So now, of course, after 5-6 years down the line, is getting mainstream, and we know all the studies and the science behind it has helped a lot in chickens and others. But as you say, be a creator, your niche or your market is seriously not an easy one. And since you left them, how they are now? I mean, if you can share where the insect is going, how do you see the insect economy, especially for a place like Europe, taking place? And can we be able to reduce the impact of soya or maybe fish meal for our livestock?
So insect has had a lot of ups and downs, and it's been a wild ride when I was there. And it's one of the most challenging and exciting thing, or out of comfort zone things that I've done. I think I've done a lot of things that challenge me, but this was coming from, banking into the world of insects was completely out of my comfort zone, and that's been great for it. So they build the farm. They're under a bit of financial trouble at the moment, but they're trying to carry on to solve problem nobody has really solved. So if I look more generally around the sector, I think it's under scrutiny at the moment. Like, people want to see that you can do it at scale, and that's because while you've given a very good example of like now customers wanting to buy it, the supply is not enough. And then it's all about seeing, can you do it profitably and sustainably, which is why I think also the BSF with the waste is a great way to enhance profitability and solving two problems in one go. There was a lot of debate of where you should locate these farms. And obviously, if you're solving the waste problem, waste is a local problem. So outsourcing it to cheaper region is not an option. So that's also another differentiating factor between companies. Do I long-term believe that the sector is there and has a big role to play? Yes. Capital, and I think government have a role to play to help that sector carry on, because it's solving something for the future. People as a trend, because we're also quite focused on health as well, are really focused nowadays on protein. Like, you see a lot more people and a lot of companies advertising anything with protein, yogurt with more protein, skyr. Like, if you go to the supermarket, you see it. So I think the demand from customer for more protein is there. What kind of protein do they buy and do they want? The protein shake and so on. Insects, where protein in general, we're always claimed for, as you mentioned, all the studies that have been done for health, and therefore the benefit, higher protein concentration, and you have, all kind of like some studies show that it was reducing cholesterol in mice, so protein shakes, will people want to have protein shakes that have insect protein in it? Yes, no. Reinforcement strategy. So I think the use case are very many. It's showing that the people who are scaling it are able to do it profitably at scale, and that there is enough. Because if you think of a large customer, like very large company, they're not going to put that in their product line unless they know they can get enough supply. It's too risky. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there needs to be some support until you get there. And then eventually, I'm sure it will be a more mainstream product. But I'll also give you a funny stat, and then maybe we move on from insect per se. But if you take the cats and the dogs in the US, they eat as much meat as the entire French nation. Wow. So if you are even replacing, you were giving the example earlier that, you give insect protein to cats or dogs. If you replace that as part of the feed of the pets, then I think we're solving a big climate issue as well.
Fantastic. I mean, I didn't know that. Thank you. I mean, I thought, well, that's insane, actually. I bet. I mean, and then if you take for comparison some of the country on my continent here, I'm sure they are consuming for maybe 3 or 4 countries. So no, and that's why it's really important. Insect feeds and others, larvae, crickets or others, can be a solution, especially for animal feeds. to support and
Absolutely.
really reduce also the use of soya or fish meal, which is also a competitor for human food. You say that a word that I want to stress, regulation and the future, and how government can streamline that, because there is a lot of talks about, okay, the regulate, just let the businesses do, but of course, sometimes, especially to foster a market, also to create a market, we need also the impact of the regulations. So there has been a lot of discussion about the regulatory change more towards sustainability. Now it seems that government are going backwards and backtracking a bit. How do you see the regulatory environment, and how this is helping also farm like yours that has also a drive for innovation and sustainability? Is it helping you, or are you seeing like a slowing down in that direction?
Well, if you're looking at the current trend, it's I think it's like slowing down. But I think, as we were discussing earlier, you and I, you have to look at the long-term picture. So long term, I think regulation is a powerful play, or it can help sustain companies. So it's trying to incentivize. And when we think regulation is stopping people, I think here it should be more incentivize people to allocate capital where it has long-term benefit for society. And so that's one thing. And the second thing is also reporting to make it more transparent, so that, because I think when you look at the end customer, people are more and more vigilant and careful about what they do, what they buy, where it goes, what the company are doing. So that's very important. And I don't think that trend is going away anyway. So then it's just having the framework that support what customer wants. And at the end of the day, that's when you look at a company, that's what you look at. So I think it's making sure that people are accountable, raising the bar of accountability, and helping that way with capital being allocated in the right place. Especially since we said that, in the current environment for the last few years, scarcity of capital is there. And then I think it's kind of there to stay. And these business look a bit more risky than others. Let's face it. It's probably easier to go invest on other business where your return on capital seems quicker. So how do you make sure that if people are going to take this more risk or have it a bit more difficult, that they're incentivized the right way? And I think it's there that the shift can be helped.
And that is an important part. Of course, it will take some time. And of course, and how do you see the future, for example, for sustainable finance? How will it evolve in the next decade? Are there any opportunities that you see, maybe investors that are on board should prioritize in the space?
I think if you look at how sustainable finance has evolved over the last 10 years, maybe that's also a sign of how it will be for the next 10. I was in banking, and people started talking about this thing, but it kind of felt like you had one person in the room, and it was a bit like pulling your joker in the room, like, hey, come and talk about that. It's like the weird stuff. And so we went from that to sort of, it's much more mainstream. And I think that's here to stay. That trend, sustainable finance, is not going to be niche. And that's the idea in a way. If we've done well, you don't need to call it sustainable finance. It's just become finance, and we're financing business that are aligned with the long-term value that we as a society want. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but, we went from like super niche to more mainstream. And I think that trend will carry on, just driven by the underlying trends that I gave you, that this is what people want. People are more and more, I think, conscious of what's happening around them. And how do you address that? So, and, you vote with your feet, you vote with your money. That's how it happens. So finance will follow, and all the actors in the financial world will not ignore the trends. So I think it will go more mainstream than it is today. And again, looking back how it started, it's already gone a long way.
And it's encouraging against all the backlash and the discussion that we are having in the field. And then we also need to, apart from the doom and gloom, I always say that there is possibility, especially there is a huge opportunity to make sustainability or especially sustainable finance and delivering solution a huge profitable opportunity. And if you have to leave from your career in the banking, in the world and other, and now in the invest. So for listeners, for lay people that listen around, what would be a message that you want to give us, our audience, how maybe they can do some small impact and how they can work on becoming more aware on all the problem that we have nowadays in the world?
Well, the message I wanted to leave you and your audience with, Amarele, is that I think we're in a moment where big change requires bold thinking, whether it's climate, food, finance, or health, for the topics that are important to us. This is the time to build things that matter. And if you're an entrepreneur, an investor, or just someone who wants to make a difference, lean in. And I truly believe the world needs it at the moment. So be bold.
And that's why we are also here trying to give a voice to people like you and others, trying to deliver change. It's not always easy. I'm sure it's very challenging, but we are there to support that. So thank you so much, Isabelle. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your stories, your experiences, and how you are delivering change, especially at critical startup like Ÿnsect. And we learned also a lot about BSF. This is something that I don't think many people knew about it before. Thank you so much, Isabelle. It's been a pleasure and honor having you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Samuele.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.